My name is Diane Kaufman. I'm 66 years old. I want to tell you something that sounds almost offensive when you first hear it. A full bank account is not enough preparation for retirement. It helps. Of course it helps. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Money buys room. It buys options. It buys a better Medicare supplement, a house without a mortgage, flights that don't leave you angry before breakfast, and the comfort of knowing the electric bill won't become a family discussion. I understand that. I've lived without enough. I've lived with enough. Enough is better. But here's the part that surprised me. When I finally had the savings, the budget, the home, the insurance, the adult children launched, the accountant satisfied, and the calendar cleared, I still woke up some mornings feeling completely unprepared. Not financially, personally, emotionally, quietly. There was money in the bank, but no one was waiting for my opinion. There was security on paper, but no urgency in the day. There were no payroll problems, no client calls, no woman at 32 asking me how to price her first real contract, no meeting I had to dress for, no room I had to walk into and prove I belonged there. And I had spent so many years becoming the woman who could handle all of that when it stopped, I didn't know who was left in the room. Richard asked me once, very carefully, "Are you bored?" I said no, and I was telling the truth. Then he said, "Then maybe you're not bored. Maybe you're untethered." I didn't speak to him for most of the afternoon, not because he was wrong, because he was exactly right. You wake up and the money is still there. That's the strange part. The accounts are fine. The house is quiet. The pantry is full. The car starts. The health insurance card is in your wallet. The budget works. The life you planned for actually arrived. And that feels unsettling. Not bad weird, not good weird, just weird. The mistake I made was believing financial readiness would automatically become emotional readiness. It didn't. I had prepared for numbers. I had not prepared for absence. No one tells you how much of your identity hides inside pressure, deadlines, responsibility, being needed, being consulted, being the person who knows what comes next. When all of that softens, the silence can feel almost rude. So I'm not going to give you a 5-step system. I don't have one. And Richard would say I become deeply suspicious of anyone who does. I'm just going to tell you what happened and what I noticed, because a full bank account can protect you from certain fears. It cannot tell you what to do with the woman you became while earning it. I'm standing in my closet wearing a navy blazer, not holding it, wearing it, blouse tucked in, earrings on, hair done properly. The shoes were good, too good for the errand I thought I was about to run. I had written a dinner on the wrong week. That was all. A business dinner that had happened 3 weeks earlier. I had already gone. I had already sat next to a woman named Elise who talked too long about her nephew's startup. I had already come home and told Richard the salmon was dry. But for some reason, I had written it again in my calendar. So there I was, fully dressed for a meeting that didn't exist. I stood in front of the mirror for 10 minutes. There's a version of this story where I look composed. That's not the one I'm telling. The real version is that I laughed first. Then I sat on the edge of the bed. Then I cried a little, not dramatically, just enough to annoy myself. I remember looking at the blazer sleeve and thinking, this jacket knows who I am better than I do right now. That sounds absurd, but it felt true. That blazer had been in rooms with me, difficult rooms, rooms where I was underestimated, rooms where I was overcharged, rooms where I had to be sharper than I felt, rooms where I learned to pause before answering, because silence can be useful if you can tolerate it. That jacket had a purpose. I did not. Not that afternoon, not in the way I understood purpose. Richard came to the bedroom door and said, "Are we going somewhere?" I said, "Apparently not." He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, "Do you want dinner anyway?" That was Richard. Practical mercy. We went to a small Italian place near the water. I wore the blazer. I ordered branzino I didn't particularly want. He let me be quiet. And somewhere between the bread and the check, I understood something I had not been willing to say. I had money for retirement. I did not yet have a life for it. Not a lifestyle, a life. Those are different. So I want to talk through 5 things a full bank account did not prepare me for. Things I did not understand until the pressure was gone. Not because money doesn't matter, it does, but because there are parts of retirement money simply cannot organize for you, and those are often the parts that make you feel most unsteady. The first thing money did not prepare me for was becoming less necessary. That sentence still makes me uncomfortable. I don't like how needy it sounds, but there it is. For most of my adult life, I was necessary somewhere, at home, in the business, in a negotiation, in a crisis, on a call, at a table where someone needed an answer and expected me to have one. I wasn't always graceful about it. Let's not improve the past too much. There were years when I confused being necessary with being important. There were years when I was proud of being exhausted because exhaustion seemed to prove the scale of my life. My mother would not have admired that. She believed a woman should never look as rushed as she felt. I failed that standard often, but I was useful, visibly useful. Then retirement softened that, not all at once. Slowly. A former client stopped calling, then another. A younger woman I used to advise started figuring things out without me. Sophie asked my opinion less often, which was healthy and slightly insulting. Jonathan still called, but he didn't need me to solve anything. He mostly wanted to check in. That should have pleased me. Some days it did. Other days it felt like standing outside a room where I used to have a key. I remember one Thursday afternoon. I had nothing scheduled until dinner. Nothing. This was supposed to be a luxury. It was the kind of open calendar I used to fantasize about when I had 12 things stacked on top of each other. I made tea. I sat in the sitting room. I opened a book, and I couldn't concentrate. I kept checking my phone as if the world had forgotten to ask me for something. No emergency came. No question came. No problem came wearing shoes and carrying a folder. Just quiet. That's when I realized I had not only retired from work, I had retired from being interrupted. And part of me missed it. Not the stress, the confirmation, the small daily proof that my presence changed the outcome of something. A bank account does not replace that. It can pay for comfort. It cannot make you feel consequential. The second thing money did not prepare me for was how strange comfort can feel when you've been driven by pressure for so long. I know that sounds ungrateful. I don't mean it that way. Comfort is a gift. But if you built your life while bracing for impact, comfort can feel suspicious. I started my first business with less money than confidence, and my confidence was not as impressive as people later made it sound. There were months when payroll made me physically tense. There was one year in my late 30s when I knew the exact number in the operating account every morning before I brushed my teeth. $18,420, then $12,090. Then $31,700 after a client finally paid. I remember numbers like other people remember weather. Years later, when things were easier, I still carried that habit, even after the business was sold, even after the real estate did well, even after the accountant began using a tone I found almost cheerful. I still checked. Richard would say, "What are you looking for?" I would say, "Nothing." That was the problem. I was looking for danger. A woman can become very skilled at surviving a threat that no longer exists. I don't fully understand why the body does that, but mine did. After I retired, the absence of pressure did not feel peaceful immediately. It felt like I had missed something, a bill, a call, a deadline, a hidden problem with teeth. One morning in Florida, I was sitting outside with coffee. The light was beautiful, the kind of morning people pay money to photograph badly, and I could not relax. There was nothing wrong. That was what felt wrong. Richard came out and sat beside me. He was already retired by then and annoyingly good at it. He said, "You're allowed to enjoy this." I said, "I know." He said, "Knowing isn't the same as doing." I looked at him over my sunglasses. He smiled. I considered pushing him into the pool, briefly, lovingly, but he was right. The bank account said we were safe. My nervous system had not received the memo. That took longer than I expected. The third thing money did not prepare me for was the loss of a professional identity. Not income, identity. Those are not the same. When people ask what I did, I can answer easily. I helped businesses grow. I built and sold a service business. I invested in small companies. I advised women who were building things. All of that is accurate. It's also past tense. That bothered me more than I wanted to admit. I was at a dinner about a year after I had stepped away. Not a business dinner exactly, more social. The kind where everyone pretends they aren't comparing lives and then absolutely does. A man asked me, "So what do you do?" Simple question. I opened my mouth. And I paused. Not because I didn't have an answer, because all my answers sounded like artifacts. I used to own. I used to advise. I used to sit on. I used to manage. I used to decide. There's a version of me that would have given a polished answer, something elegant and vague. That night I said, "I'm figuring that out." He blinked. He did not know what to do with that. Neither did I. Richard heard it from across the table. Later in the car he said, "That was honest." I said, "It was undignified." He said, "Those aren't opposites." I hate when he becomes useful at inconvenient times. But I kept thinking about it. A full bank account can let you stop working. It does not tell you what to say when the world asks who you are now. And the world asks in small ways. Forms, introductions, dinner conversations, airport lounges, your own mind at 6:40 in the morning. I had spent decades shaping an answer. Then retirement loosened it. For a while I felt like I had become a woman with excellent luggage and no destination. That is not a tragedy, but it is disorienting. The fourth thing money did not prepare me for was how relationships change when you're no longer busy enough to hide inside work. This one is tender. I have to be careful with it. Work can become a respectable hiding place. People praise you for it. They call you disciplined, focused, responsible, driven. They don't always see what you're avoiding because the results look so good. I avoided stillness. I avoided certain conversations. I avoided being fully available because full availability felt inefficient. That's not charming, but it's true. When I retired, Richard and I had more time together than we'd had in years. That sounds romantic. Sometimes it was. Sometimes it was two competent people realizing they had been running parallel lives with great manners. Richard retired before I did. He adjusted faster. Of course he did. He can read for 3 hours and not turn it into a performance review of the book. I cannot explain how irritating that was to witness. One afternoon, maybe 6 months after I stepped back, We were having lunch at home. Nothing special, salad, leftover chicken. He had made it, which means it looked better than mine would have. He asked, "Do you actually like your days now?" I said yes, too quickly. He put his fork down, not dramatically. Richard is not dramatic. He simply put the fork down with the quiet confidence of a man about to make my afternoon worse. He said, "Try again." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, "I like parts of them." He nodded. That was the first honest answer. Money had given us the chance to have lunch together on a Wednesday. It had not taught me how to be present at the table. It had not taught me how to stop mentally managing everything. It had not taught me how to listen without preparing a solution. Sophie once said something similar. She said, "Mum, sometimes I call because I want you, not your strategy." I remember where I was standing when she said it. Kitchen counter, phone in my left hand. I was slicing a pear badly with a knife too large for the job. I said nothing for a moment because she had caught me. I had become so practiced at being useful that I sometimes skipped being tender. That cost me something. Not everything, but something. Retirement gave me more time with the people I love. Then it quietly asked whether I knew how to use it. A full bank account cannot answer that question for you. The fifth thing money did not prepare me for was the quiet return of old regrets. Not all at once, not like a storm, more like a drawer opening by itself. When you're busy, you can keep certain memories moving. They don't have time to sit down. Then retirement gives them a chair. I started thinking about things I had not thought about properly in years. Sophie's school play I missed because I was traveling. A call from my mother I rushed because I was between meetings. A business decision at 44 that cost me more than money. A friend I stopped calling because the friendship required softness I did not have available at the time. None of these memories ruined me, but they visited, and I had fewer places to hide. I remember one Friday night, Richard had gone to pick up something from the store. I was setting the table, just the two of us. Candles, because my mother believed Friday night deserved candles, even if the week did not. I put the plates down and suddenly thought of her hands, my mother's hands. She had this way of smoothing a tablecloth from the center outward, efficient, beautiful, without drama. I realized I could not remember the last full conversation we'd had without me checking the time. That sat with me. I didn't collapse. I didn't make a speech. I just stood there with 2 napkins in my hand and felt the cost of becoming someone. Because that's the part we don't like to say. Building a life costs something. Even a good life. Even a successful life. Even a life you're proud of. Money can prove that some of the choices worked. It cannot refund the ones that hurt. I'm not saying this to create guilt. Guilt is not useful unless it changes something, and even then, only briefly. I'm saying a full bank account can give you room, and room has echoes. Sometimes those echoes are lovely, sometimes they're not. The sixth thing money did not prepare me for was needing a new definition of enough. This surprised me because I thought enough was a number. For years it was. Enough to make payroll, enough to cover rent, enough to hire the right person, enough to survive a bad quarter, enough to stop worrying in the specific way I had worried before. Then there was enough to retire. That number mattered. I respected it. But after retirement, enough became less mathematical. Enough attention, enough purpose, enough contact with my children that I felt connected but not intrusive. Enough quiet without disappearing into it. Enough beauty in a day to feel awake. Enough usefulness without turning every conversation into a consultation. These were harder to measure. My accountant was no help at all. And I say that with affection. He could tell me what we could spend. He could not tell me why I bought 3 linen shirts in nearly the same colour in 1 month. I told Richard they were different. He said, "They are all cream." I said, "One is ivory." He said, "I apologise." He did not apologise. Not really. But I understood what I was doing. I was trying to purchase a feeling of becoming someone new, a softer woman, a woman with unhurried mornings and appropriate fabrics, a woman who knew what to do with leisure. The shirts were lovely. They did not solve the problem. No object was going to introduce me to myself. That's when I figured out that retirement enough has to be practiced, not declared. A bank statement can say you're fine. The day still asks, fine for what? That question took me longer than I expected. Here's what I actually think. Money is a foundation. It is not a personality. It is not a marriage. It is not a reason to get out of bed. It is not a repair shop for every choice you made while trying to earn it. And it is not proof that you'll know how to receive the life you spent decades building. That last part was humbling for me. I had been good at earning. I had been good at deciding. I had been good at carrying responsibility. Receiving peace was less familiar. I wish I could say I became graceful quickly. I did not. I became slightly more honest. That was probably more useful. If this landed somewhere familiar, leave a comment. Tell me what money did not prepare you for in retirement. Not the obvious bills, not the big headlines, the quieter thing, the loss of identity, the change in your marriage, the adult children needing you differently, the strange mornings, the old regrets, the discomfort of finally having enough and realizing enough doesn't tell you who to be. I read the comments. I find them useful, more useful than I expected to, actually. There is something clarifying about people telling the truth without polishing it too much. And if you're still preparing for retirement, I'd be curious what you're preparing for besides the money. Because the money matters, it matters deeply, but it is not the whole preparation. I wish someone had said that to me a little earlier. Maybe I would have believed them, maybe I wouldn't have. I can be stubborn in expensive shoes. That's enough for today. Take good care.